Everybody, Hi everybody, I'm Logan Hansen. Today I'm going to be running you through some of my advanced stats previews for the second round of the NCAA Division III football playoffs. The game that I'm going to be focusing on today is Mount Union versus John Carroll. This looks to be the game of the week this week with two highly rated teams and a very close score projection. So let's dig right in. So on the top line here, we can see the projected score for each team. Mount Union at 30, John Carroll at 29.5, and those projected scores are calculated from each team's predictive rating in my computer model. So you can see those ratings here. Mount Union slightly lower than John Carroll, but they're favored in this game thanks to home field advantage. My ratings are a little bit more sensitive to recent performance. John Carroll has had two of their best games of the season in the last 2 weeks, and Mount Union 2 weeks ago in week 11 had probably their worst performance of the year. So that's why these ratings look a little different than what some people might expect or what you might see from different computer models. And those predictive ratings are made up of each team's adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency, which you can see here. And then we have NPI, which is NCAA Power Index. That is the NCAA's metric for Division III playoff selection and seeding. This is not something that I came up with. This is the NCAA's metric. And then we have strength of schedule. And this is my metric, not the NCAA's. And you can see John Carroll's strength of schedule is slightly higher than Mount Union's thanks to a tougher non-conference opponent in UW-Whitewater and then an extra game against a good team in Mount St. Joseph. So once we get past that, then we can start comparing different units in each team. So we can compare Mount Union's offense to John Carroll's defense. That's what we have right here when Mount Union has the ball. And then John Carroll's offense to Mount Union's defense, which is when John Carroll has the ball. And within both of these, we have raw stats and opponent-adjusted stats. The raw stats are what anybody could calculate off of stats.ncaa.org. No fancy math really involved there. And then the opponent-adjusted stats are when I try to factor in the strength of schedule for each team and try to get a number that is independent of the opponents that the team played. So this would be what you'd expect a team to do against an average team. So since both teams played slightly above average opponents this year, we have their raw stats improving when we get into the opponent adjusted stats. And then in the center column here, we have the advantage. So all I'm doing in this is looking at the national ranking of each phase here. So if you have a better national ranking, your offense ranks better than the opponent's defense, then you have an advantage. And the more arrows, the more advantage you have. One arrow, 39 versus 43, not a big advantage. Two arrows, you've got a pretty good advantage. And then, down here, we've got three arrows. That's a big advantage for John Carroll in that phase. So let's go row by row. First, we've got total adjusted yards per play. That's essentially just yards per play with a bonus for good plays and a penalty for bad plays. So good plays would be things like first downs and touchdowns. Bad plays would be things like fumbles and interceptions. And we can see Mount Union's offense is elite in terms of total adjusted yards per play. And John Carroll's offense also very good. Both of these offenses are top 10 in overall total adjusted yards per play. And then each defense is very good, but not great, right? So we've got number 44 defense for Mount Union and the number 35 defense for John Carroll. And then the next row, we have series conversion rate. So this is how often a team is moving the chains every time they get a new set of downs. So it's either moving the chains or scoring a touchdown. So this is total number of opportunities and then how often you either got a first down or scored a touchdown. So you can see Mount Union 83% on the season offensively, 81% for John Carroll. And then the defenses are both the same at 64%. So I like to kind of think of series conversion rate as your efficiency, and then your total adjusted yards per play more as the explosiveness metric. So these offenses have somewhat similar profiles, as do the defenses, where the offenses are a little bit more explosive than they are efficient. And the defenses, likewise, they're a little bit better at preventing the explosive plays, but teams do move the chains on them a little bit more often than we'd expect based on their scoring averages and their yards per play. And then the third row, we've got points per drive. That's pretty self-explanatory. And you can see here that for Mount Union's offense and defense, John Carroll's offense and defense, the points per drive is one of the better metrics that we can see here. And some of that, for the defenses especially, is thanks to rarely having short fields because they both are paired with good offenses, right? So points per drive is going to be a little bit more susceptible to how good the other unit is on your team because field position is so important to that, whereas total adjusted yards per play and series conversion rate are going to be a little bit more independent of field position. And then we have negative play rate. So negative plays would be your TFLs, sacks, and turnovers. So this is how many negative plays you had divided by the total number of plays you had on the season. So we can see if we look at Mount Union's offense, again, that this is probably the worst aspect of their offense is that they are allowing some negative plays to creep in. But John Carroll's defense, it's probably one of the worst aspects of their defense is they're not creating negative plays at an overwhelming rate. When we look at the raw stats, they rank 111th out of 240 teams in Division III, so not great there. And then we've got John Carroll's offense, negative play rate, 26th in the country. Again, very similar profile to what Mount Union has. We'll get to some differences later. And then Mount Union's defense excels at creating negative plays. So if there's one matchup where the defenses have an advantage in this game, it's Mount Union's defense has an advantage at creating negative plays against John Carroll's offense. Then the next couple rows, we have third and fourth down conversion rates, points per red zone trip. So these two rows I like to think of as a little bit more descriptive and not predictive because they are with the stats that we have available in Division III, not having in-depth play-by-play for each game, each team. It's a little harder to get more predictive metrics for these, but third and fourth down conversion percentage, that's total number of conversions on either third or fourth down divided by total number of third downs faced. And your conversion rate is going to be really reliant on your average downs to go, right? So that's why I say this is a little bit more descriptive than prescriptive because without having the yards to go on every third down, it's hard to create a metric that would tell you if they're better than an average team on third or fourth downs. Most of what we're seeing on this metric is going to be thanks to having shorter third downs because you have a better offense on first and second downs. And then points per red zone trip is probably the noisiest stat that I have on here. Noisy in the sense that it's not going to align with the team's overall ranking or their ranking in other aspects of these advanced stat previews. And that's just because there's a lot fewer red zone trips, and then the difference between a touchdown and a PAT versus a missed field goal is pretty large. And when there's so few opportunities, it can swing things pretty drastically, especially for these playoff teams where their defenses aren't going to be seeing a lot of red zone trips throughout the course of this season unless they're playing a really, really tough conference schedule where they're playing top 25 teams every week. So red zone trip, pretty noisy, but we can see what the trends have been for the teams on this year. And both of these teams have been pretty good in the red zone, averaging about 6 points per red zone trip. And then both offenses have been pretty successful on third and fourth downs, but nothing really crazy jumping off the page there. And then we've got rushing stats, so rushing total adjusted yards per play. Same calculation as up here, bonus for good plays, penalty for bad plays, but this is just on rushing downs. And this is where we can kind of see some differences in the styles between the offenses. Mount Union's rushing offense, elite. Echeverry is a dude. The Mount Union offense is third in the nation in opponent adjusted total adjusted yards per play, and the only two teams ahead of them are Salisbury and North Central. And then down here we can see John Carroll's offense, 22nd in rushing. And then when we look at defenses, John Carroll's defense 51st against the run, and down here Mount Union 52nd. So defensively, very similar, but this is where we're seeing the differences in the offense. And then John Carroll, elite passing offense. Number 3 in the nation, just like we had Mount Union, number 3 in the nation in total adjusted yards per play. So John Carroll, much better passing offense. And then, again, very similar in terms of the defensive efficiency here. And then we've also got the TFL rate. So this is just TFLs on rushing plays, so sacks are excluded from that. Likewise, sacks are excluded from rushing total adjusted yards per play. The NCAA includes them in there. I don't, because that's stupid. They're a passing play. So sacks are included in passing total adjusted yards per play. So that's where we see our sack right here, interception right here. And you can see John Carroll does a great job protecting the ball. Mount Union has not really been getting a ton of interceptions this year. They rank in the 200s out of 240 teams nationally in opponent adjusted interception rate, but doing a great job getting after the quarterback with a very high sack rate. John Carroll's defense, not a very high sack rate. So like I said, Mount Union, very good, creating negative plays. So that's one place where we can see an advantage for Mount Union there. Then we can get into special teams. So the special team stats here, I'm calling these total adjusted yards per play just because when we're looking at special teams, it can be hard getting a good average and trying to isolate the whole unit and not just how good the punter is or how good the returner is. So we're looking at here, overall net punting, and then there's a bonus for good plays, penalty for bad plays. So a bonus for a good play would be, if you have a punt down inside the 20, that's a little bit of a bonus. If you have a punt blocked, obviously a very bad play. So that's a big negative. If you have a punt return for a touchdown, those return yards are counted against you, and then there's a penalty for allowing the touchdown as well. So this is Mount Union's punt unit against John Carroll's punt return unit. So when we're looking at the return unit, so punt return unit or kickoff return unit, what we're looking at is how good on average were your opponents. So the opponent adjustments come into play pretty heavily here because that should be able to account for how good the opposing kickers you faced were when we're looking at the net yardage. So we're getting that factored out when we go from the raw stats into the opponent adjusted stats. And then we've also got block rate right here. So this is just on punting plays. How often is Mount Union allowing blocks? How often is John Carroll creating blocks? So, up above, I talked about Mount Union having an advantage defensively, creating negative plays on special teams. A big advantage that I think here is the potential for a blocked kick, creating a big play. And if that happens, it's probably going to be John Carroll getting the block. You can see John Carroll has not allowed a punt or a kick block all season. Mount Union has not created a punt or a kick block all season. And then Mount Union has had some punts blocked and had some of their PATs and field goals blocked, while John Carroll has blocked some. So if there's an opportunity for a big play on special teams, that's what I'd be looking for, right? And then we've got kickoffs right here, kickoff return, right? So this is John Carroll's kickoff unit against Mount Union's, or John Carroll's kick return unit against Mount Union's kickoff unit, and vice versa. Mount Union, one of the best kick return units in the country, but they also face one of the better kickoff units in the country in John Carroll. So not necessarily a huge advantage there, but maybe Mount Union's able to bust one and set their offense up for some great field position. And then when we're looking at field goals, this is field goals made and field goal percentage over expected. So the over expected means that I did some fancy math. So it's called a delta analysis to try to figure out what an average kicker's field goal percentage should be expected to be at different depths on the field. So the delta analysis tries to account for the fact that better kickers are probably going to be the ones that are going to be kicking the most deep kicks, right? If a kicker isn't very good, their offensive coordinator, their head coach, isn't going to be sending the PAT or sending the field goal unit out when it's 4th and medium and it would be a 40, 45-yard kick, right? Only good kickers are going to be given those opportunities. So the delta analysis looks at each kicker in the country and what the difference is between their PAT or field goal percentage at different depths on the field. So when we're looking at these two units here, there's probably not a huge difference here, right? So the total difference is 0.9. So that's one field goal made or missed from Mount Union to John Carroll's field goal unit. So, the difference of one field goal over the course of the entire season, hard to say with any certainty which unit is better. Mount Union's has been better, but is that likely to continue? Again, that's when we get into descriptive versus prescriptive statistics. And then we've got PAT unit. Nothing needed there for explanation. That's pretty straightforward. And we've got the blocks allowed, blocks created, and that's everything that we've got to look at here. So if you like this, you can find all of these on either Blue Sky, Threads, or Twitter. I'm LOGHAN, Loghan Ratings on Twitter, Hansen Ratings on Blue Sky, Hansen Ratings on Threads. And thanks for listening. Have a great day. Go enjoy the Division III playoffs this weekend.